Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. Tonight's topic, Civil War and the Democrat Party. There is certainly a civil war. We're seeing it. We're going to discuss the different aspects of it, the tells, and I think we're probably going to be getting into the how the other side will deal with it and can our side make anything of it. I am Carlos. I am joined tonight by it's Alabama hot, and my mangina is sweating Marcus, and by Raul, who's had a very drawn out long day, and is happy that this is his last appearance for the night.
Yeah,
So, of course, today's primaries. Maybe later on in the podcast, we'll look into a couple of races, see if anything's happening in Florida.
yeah,
It's Alaska, Wyoming, and Florida. And
yeah,
speaking of battlegrounds of fights within the party, we've been seeing the communists. And I'm sorry, but tonight I'm not going to use that bullshit term, Democrat Socialists of America. Those are communists. I'm also going to get into why maybe that doesn't have the impact that it should. Uh, some of you probably already suspect why. But anyhow, in other states, we've seen last week, uh, at least Wisconsin went more or less how one would think, and that person, their communist candidate, lost, and the communist candidate in Michigan, of course, the doctor who can't pass the boards, who doesn't have a license, who doesn't treat a patient, and whose psychiatric wife does not accept Medicare. He wants Medicare for all, just not his wife's patients because she doesn't take Medicare. So the fact that he won over what I call, if any of you guys ever watched the series Gilmore Girls, there was this annoying fat little girl named Suki. She was a chef, and this lady, that Katie, whatever her name was over there, Stevens, Haley Stevens, to me reminds me of Suki. So this guy, this communist raghead, beat Suki by half a percentage. I think they're genuinely worried that he could possibly lose, and that's part of the battle. Here in Florida, we have three. I thought it was two, but it's three. One of them is duking it out with Jared Moskowitz. I would imagine Jared will beat him. And there's another one going for Debbie Wasserman Schultz's. He said that he won't put anyone in, he won't deport any criminals, put them in jail. So let's support him for life and hope they get parole, right? Dumb motherfucker. Anyway, that's where he's going with that. Would you like to get into some of the signs of this war in the Democrat Party, Marcus?
I think what the Democrats are going through, it's what alcoholics call a moment of sobriety, where they just kind of wake up. It's like, this is kind of fucked up. I've been going through this haze as a drunk for this long, while people in the middle and on the right were questioning all of this for like 15 years. When you say the word woke, you also equate the word joke as well, because it's like losing uh, concepts, losing ideas. It's like far flung, crazy stuff that we say this is beyond stupid. But it's like the people on that party, the Progressive Party, they kind of went along like lemmings, just kind of, or the Pied Piper, the rats following the Pied Piper on this level of craziness. And I just want to go on some of like the losing topics. You go like defund the police, defund prisons, go against Israel, pro-Muslim extremism, uh, super hyphenating the LGBT community, downgrading the role of what a woman is.
Eliminate the sun. Don't leave
What?
that in. Eliminate the sun.
Yeah, having open borders. Cannot define what a woman is. Arresting Trump and booking him and changing the laws, trying to assassinate him a few times, standing down on national anthems during the like sporting events, renaming bases, taking away statues, ruining like IP products of like hobbies like movies, games. Just and it's like, but the thing is, like when you're dealing with products, uh, you either make a profit or you don't. So these like super woke idea has been a financial loss. You look at like Budweiser. So we've been kind of sober addressing this. And now recently, it took them almost 20 years. they're waking up and realize that the communists hijacked the party. And the thing is, we talked about it before. Like it takes a certain percentage to create a momentum, like a revolution. You need like whatever 8, 12, 10% of the populace to for a revolution to metastasize into a big movement. The thing about like the DSA, the super progressive wing of the party, they were just like small outliers with the Democrats, and then it was starting to pick up momentum to the point where you get establishment Democrats who are losing their races because you get a hyper hyper motivated DSA crowd. And the thing is, it's when I mentioned about the lemming effect, uh, like when they did a polling about favorability of socialism, 4 out of 10 in out of Americans was okay with socialism, 4 out of 10. But when you shift it to Democrats, that goes to one out of 3. So now we're looking at the Civil War, where a number of prominent Democrats are just, I guess, they're doing their last ditch efforts to save the party. So that's what we're witnessing. They're trying to like prevent this from 33% to 50%,
Yeah.
where and it's all about electionability, and even the establishment Democrats don't realize that this is not electable positions or or fronting electable candidates, and that's it.
Raul, why do you think that there isn't more vigorous pushback from the establishment Democrat Party?
For a variety of reasons, I think to a certain extent they were asleep at the wheel. Right, for the longest time, it was kind of hip to have AOC and Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian, and all these people in the party, and say, "Hey, look, guys, we're a really big tent. We have this young, sort of progressive, contingent here that has found a home in the Democratic Party." And I think what they didn't realize is that they were letting a virus, or COVID into their tent is what they were doing, right? Um, because look, it's to a certain extent it's hard to fathom, even for me, man. I mean, I've looked at this for a long time, and I still am kind of amazed at how much indoctrination has occurred in our schools and our universities. Okay, um, in terms of, and particularly the young people, that are coming out with values that are totally incoherent with, or not aligned with the historic principles that both Democrats and Republicans agreed to. Right, that hey, the Constitution's important. Hey, bicameral legislature is important, a House and a Senate. Hey, it's important to, support Supreme Court decisions. That's the last arbiter. That's why it's called the Supreme Court. It's the Supreme Court of the land. They make the final decision. I mean, those are all things that you and I and Marcus, I mean, we all grew up with. We kind of just took it at face value, right? I mean, not just we took it at face value. I mean, we understood why it was there, right? Because it was the intent of the founding fathers. And now with this sort of virus in the party, right? I mean, this radical element, they have found out that anytime you sort of open the door, you think that you just want to crack open the door and let in a few. But what they don't understand is that these few are very heavily supported. In an almost covert fashion, but a sophisticated covert fashion, by huge sums of money. A lot of it is pointing at George Soros and some tech billionaires and stuff like that are really hell bent on getting these people into power, magnifying their influence, bringing in others afterwards. Right? I mean, they've got their foot in the door now. and others are pouring in, and money is pouring in. And the traditional Democrats, they're also finding that now they're under attack. Their sources of income, traditional sources of income. I'll give you an example: Act Blue, right, which is their main fundraising arm. Okay, now that is under heavy scrutiny by the Justice Department. I mean, there's been all sorts of shenanigans there with money pouring in from tiny little amounts from donors that don't have to really disclose who they are. I mean, a lot of suspicious stuff going on there. There's apparently talk that a lot of this conversation about USAID, okay, is in fact that it was a piggy bank for a lot of democratic government and progressive causes. Okay, and I have heard that from people that used to work at USAID. Okay, that were frustrated because they saw what was happening, right? And they're saying, yeah, I mean, we kind of knew all along that this was a big, sort of scam, and that a lot of this money would never end up helping people in Ukraine or in Kenya or in, Uganda, whatever. It was all going back to lobbyists and DCs and progressive causes within the Democratic Party and back to George Soros, okay, who would then just kind of like recycle it and send it back to the Democrats, right, through campaign contributions and stuff. So we, the American taxpayers, were in essence funding USAID, thinking it was, the Agency for International Development. Lo and behold, we find out that it's actually a money laundering scheme for the Democratic Party, and that money, our tax dollars, are going to people like George Soros, who in turn take it and give it back to the Democrats. Wash it through the washing machine and get it back to George Soros. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. I mean, it doesn't, to me, on the surface, I agree with most people when you hear this, that this is crazy, okay? But pull on that string. If you're listening to this program, guys and gals, pull on that string. What I'm telling you right now, pull on that string, do your research. You're going to find there's a lot of stuff going on out there, okay? And so now it's primary season. What are communists really good at? Okay, they are really good at organizing. They're really good at bringing their base out. And so the traditional Democrats that are, pissed off at Trump, they're frustrated, they're out of power, their funding sources are being cut off. Now these guys are like, they're not stepping back, they're stepping on the accelerator. They're saying, okay, we have a very motivated base, and they're going to go out and vote, and they're going to go out and vote for that progressive left. The other, Democrats that are frustrated and angry are going to stay home. And so now in the primary season, their influence will probably be outsized. But eventually what that's going to mean is big defeats come November, and perhaps they lose their chance to take back the House.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a take, but you wanted to say something about what Raul was touching on.
Yeah,
you wanted to react to that.
Well, about pulling the strings, we have to give credit when credit's due. Under the Trump regime, they turned off the spigot a lot in terms of funding, like shutting down USAID, Act Blue, and like the NGOs and the IGOs who are doing the cross-border stuff. But what's the end of that? You see the Democrat Party, the party itself is broke, and they have to refinance their building to fund themselves. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. Yep. So that I just want
to and by the way, crazy shit. Talking about crazy shit, Marcus. Okay, how's this for crazy, right? One of the things that Joe Biden, right, used to love to talk about, and every hardcore Democrat that I know love to talk about it too. Remember those Nazi protests that started in Charlottesville, Virginia, years ago? The Ku Klux Klan that went out that Trump said, all voices must be heard. I mean, he fell into the trap. Well, guess what? We find out now that quote unquote, Ku Klux Klan rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, that Trump commented on, and that the Democrats, made tons of political hay out of it. Well, guess what? It was funded. Those Nazis were funded by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay,
which is under attack.
Organization, okay, that is supposedly anti-Nazi and anti bigotry and all this stuff, and they're funneling money to real Nazis, okay, and to basically, you know, push this rally, to get people riled up, and then. And by the way, the rally was over. Some people that were killed. I mean, some people that were killed or something in Virginia, right? And they want to make it all racially biased and all this stuff. And then the funny thing is that the executive director of the Southern Poverty Law Center was sleeping, with one of the Nazis. Okay, and they're funding money, right? So the Southern Poverty Law Center is actually funding Nazis. Okay, and the executive director is sleeping with a Nazi. My God, man. I mean, this is just kind of like, everything's blown up in their face at once, right? And on top of that, now you also have now Fauci, okay? Everybody's pissed off at Fauci now, and the Biden administration, put him up as a demagogue, and now we're finding out that he's not a demagogue. By the way, one second, let me grab something here. Highly recommend this book, okay? Highly recommend this book. Biological War by Annie Jacobsen. Annie Jacobsen is a sort of national security writer. She's written a bunch of books. She's written another one called Nuclear War. She's written a book on the CIA. She's written a lot of book on national security matters. But one of the things that struck me in reading this book was, and I don't think, Annie Jacobsen living in Los Angeles, I have a feeling she's not a Republican, okay? Just my guess, okay? But I think she is a frustrated Democrat. And one of the things that's in this book is, she tears apart, and the people she interviews tear apart Anthony Fauci. And they basically said, in very clear language, that gain of function research is a euphemism for biological weapons engineering. And that's what Fauci was doing, okay? This is not Raoul Moss saying it. This is, Annie Jacobsen, a highly respected national security author, in this book, Biological War, her latest book. It's in here, and she's got a list of about 20, 30 people that she interviewed, okay? All of them, PhDs, former FEMA directors, a whole bunch of people, extremely well-researched. And it also happens to be a really scary book, a great thriller, about biological warfare. Scares the pants off of you. Highly recommended.
As a person that studied the health sciences, and we're off topic because that was Fauci, but bottom line, I want to just wrap that topic up before I get into my take.
All right, sure. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but I do sometimes.
Well, that's okay. That's part of the show. But basically, when you create something, a method, a mechanism through which an organism gains function, you have to look at what is the purpose of that organism. If it's stem cells and you can engineer them to grow tissue back better, damn, that's a really good gain of function. But if you're arming up and juicing up a pathogen, that is an entity that causes pathology, which is an abnormality and a deleterious one in the body, you are doing biologic warfare. I want to push back a little bit, maybe not push back, but give a little context to this, what's going on with the party. We're seeing all that. Yeah, let's look at what's the GOP doing to take advantage of this. Not a goddamn thing. We got John Thune mucking everything up in the Senate, holding back judges, refusing to touch the SAVE Act, refusing to even hold a vote, doing its best to lose the goddamn Senate. And then we have the House, which, to his credit, Mike Johnson is fighting with what he's got, but he doesn't have much. And these people are chomping at the bit. Now, I want to touch on what is the fertile field and what is the fertilizer, the fodder that allows this communist among the youth to flourish. First of all, that soil is stupidity. We have been, as Raul mentioned earlier, we have been through 6 decades, increasingly more and more indoctrination, less and less education. Berkeley has to show fractions and basic math to college entrance, Berkeley, because they can't friggin' do math. But I'll bet they're real expert on why America's a racist country, why DEI is good, why critical race theory is good. We've created, I'd say, at least 1 and maybe 2 generations of morons. Now, the next thing is then there's a system designed to fail them. What happens when it fails them? They get pissed off. Why can't I have a house? Why does that old son of a bitch have a nice car and a nice house? And why can he eat in restaurants that I can't? Recently, Greg Gutfeld made a perfect as usual, very brilliant observation. You go to a coffee shop and you got some kid who's like in his 30s, 20s. He's got a credit card out the wazoo, and he's barely scrimping along because he's too fucking lazy to make coffee and buy a machine to get his latte. But two rows over from him is someone like one of us here, or a professional that drove in a really nice car, and he can order anything on the menu, and his card is no problem. He's got a $30,000 limit. This other guy is paying interest on his interest, and that person does not understand why it's unfair. He doesn't understand that he chose a major in uh, women's studies, art history, whatever, foreign affairs, that does not result in a job. He doesn't understand that he was stupid when he took on 80, 90, $100,000 college debt, which he now cannot pay. That person is desperate. That person is furious. That person is frustrated. And that person is easy to gaslight. And that's what these people are doing. That's what the Hassan Piker is doing. And by the way, ironically, the candidate most likely to survive the general, the communist candidate most likely to survive the general, is Doralisa Chevalier, who outed a 10-2 moderate Dominican Democrat, and she recently won. She was not backed by the blacks in the district nor by the Dominicans because they know bullshit when they see it. She was backed by stupid fucking college educated women. That's bad. That's why this thing has legs. And
Yeah.
that's
By the way, I happen to know a woman down here that knows her very, very well. In fact, they both went to Columbia University, and this woman that you mentioned, Doralisa, was, obviously a flaming liberal, and always, speaking on behalf of democratic causes and liberal causes. And my friend, who's a very bright woman, graduated top of her class, Columbia, happens to be Cuban American, conservative, Republican. She was always the alternate. And she was telling me some stories about this woman that literally just, you realize this girl is just like batshit crazy, the Daralisa, okay? And she said that this woman was so extreme, okay, that the most liberal professors, okay, in these debates would have, would end up siding with my friend, okay, with the Republican, because this woman, the stuff she was saying was just so outrageous, so out there, okay, incendiary, literally, tear the house down type of stuff, type of language that even the most liberal, crazy Democrats were like, wait a second, this woman's like unhinged, right? So,
the American flag. To me, it's just a napkin. She actually said that. Marcus, go ahead, please.
Well, just going about that is that it's about electability, the establishment, but also the DSA part of the wing is realizing it as well. So they're adapting to survive because they realize that in places where the extreme liberal, they could win. But when it comes to like moderate areas, like in Wisconsin or Idaho or Michigan
You're Florida.
or Florida, they're not going to win. So they have to cater their message. So you could go do the Spanberger method, where you hide your true intent until you get elected. Then you go all socialist out, or you could kind of like try to backpedal overtly and try to moderate. That's why they call it like woke one, woke two, and woke three,
Yeah.
like different variations of woke. And there's, oh, I used to think that way, but now I don't. I kind of modified. No, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you know what? There has to be held to that. And I get back to the Republicans. If they have so much money, they have the war chest. Elon Musk is going to chip in to counter. And it's not just George Soros, by the way. It's Alex Soros too, his son. They have to bombard, and I mean freaking bombard the airways with exposés. They need to show people don't understand. I've been hearing all these academics saying the average moron voter. They don't say that. That's my take. Well, does not understand what Marxism is. Well, fucking show them. Show them videos of the empty shells in Russia. Show them the mass graves. Show them the killing fields, Pol Pot. Show them what communism does. Show them the body count, the death marches, the gulags. That's what they have. The political prisons. That's what they have to show them. And fear works. So scare the dumb people that don't know any better. Yes.
I don't know, Carlos, if that would work because I don't think this young generation has the attention span to do that. They've been bred on TikTok videos that are maybe 30 seconds long. Maybe you need some sort of massive campaign, TikTok campaign, of little 30-second sound bites to try and get their attention. I don't know.
Well, that's what it comes. Remember, if it bleeds, it leads, and violence sells. Because if violence didn't sell, Hollywood wouldn't make such a disproportionate number of violent movies. You don't see the English Patient being remade very much, but they sure as hell make Navy SEAL movies and slasher movies, etc. Marcus, you wanted to touch on
Yeah,
that topic?
one thing to point out is that we're talking about the youth and about certain populations who are vote blue no matter who, especially if it's like DSA. But in general, there's severe credibility concerns with the Democratic Party. I mean, like they're losing on 80-20 issues, but ironically, Democrats are ahead on the generic polling. I mean, it's like a weird thing. But the thing is, like on the Trump administration, a lot of good things were done, like the big beautiful bill, zero intrusions on the border, like month after month, when it was an open border. But then you get like the short attention span of people, like the TikTok generation, and we mentioned about this in our very first podcast. It's the attitude is, "What have you done for me lately?"
Yeah.
So it's the immediate concerns when Trump is looking at a long-term uh, 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 strategy for the betterment of the U.S. in terms of the industrial base, in terms of
Yeah.
geopolitical, geostrategic
Yeah.
influence. So, but right now it's like the gas price is high, it's unaffordable housing, which the left have taken advantage of as a rallying cry, even though they, along with people in the right, have contributed to the mess.
Yeah. Look, we sort of, we've kind of like bashed on the younger generation a bit here, but I want to just quickly make the point that I don't think it's necessarily limited to the younger generation. I was shocked, earlier today I had a brief conversation with a friend who is literally genius level smart, okay, and extremely successful. He's developed a bunch of technologies and stuff that have done, very, very well. And, like I said, and this guy uh, suffers from severe TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, he um, talking to me about the insurrection at the White House and the crazy that Trump raped this crazy woman and that he's felon, convicted felon, and all this stuff. I mean, the guy just like and I'm thinking to myself, man, I mean, for being a genius.
That Carlos is a son of. Oh, hey, Carlos, glad you showed up.
Carlos kind of faded on us. You went.
Lost my internet or something. I don't know what the hell happened here, but I am back. Continue, gentlemen. Don't worry about that.
No. So I was just finishing up a point that there's a friend of mine who's a genius who come to find out he's suffering from severe TDS, and I only mention it because this guy's my age, and so it proves that it's not just the young people that are radicalized and kind of nutty. I mean, there's some very smart people out there too that haven't really thought through a lot of this stuff.
I'd like to ask you a rhetorical question. Well, actually, not rhetorical. Each one of you, I'd love to hear your take. What do you? How has this come about that there are so many people for whom, apart from the stupid choices in education and changing job market with which they are not keeping up, how else do you guys think? And we'll go Marcus and then Raul, that the inability to adapt to that. How much of that is behind this? That the reasons for which they feel that the American dream has evaded them and that they'll never reach it, and therefore they're lashing out to destroy the hell out of it. Like the kid that swipes all the pieces off of chess because he can't. He keeps losing matches.
Yeah.
Marcus.
I think modern society as a whole has been rewired permanently. Raul mentioned like the TikTok generation. We Technology has changed where everything's within our fingertips in terms of getting things done, getting answers. So we've lost some abilities as well, like able to recall phone numbers. I could remember like 10, almost 2 dozen phone numbers off the top of my head. I can't even retain a single one except my home phone number growing up and maybe one or two numbers. But what it does is like we have like short attention span. And when you were off, I alluded that that Democratic, the generic polling, Democrats are ahead, even though they have like they're suffering severe credibility issues, and then the Trump administration, we got the big beautiful bill, and we got like zero incursions in the border month after month. When prior to that, it was an open border. But the generation, as you were trying to reference to, they're thinking, well, it's unaffordable housing, the gas is too high. What have you done for me now? Not what have you done for me in the past, which was securing the border, doing all of this. What are you doing for me now? And that's how the brain is rewired as a society, which I think is a bad thing, because we talked about like the Trump strategy is more long term, how we're going to become more preeminent for decades to come. But sometimes you're going to go through some growing pains because you're dealing with Iran and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
It's,
yeah,
it's Dad, you got to go on podcasts. You got to run online. Dad, you got to run on TikTok. So he you've stuck for that and to great success. I think he's now dropped the ball on that and forgetting the long term in today's uh, fruit fly attention span era that we have doesn't wash. Raul, what other things do you think that maybe are contributing to this dissatisfaction, this frustration that I'm a have not and I'll be damned. I'm gonna take everything away from those haves,
Look,
and that's
I don't look. I think there's a lot of we can throw a lot of darts at the younger generation, and I think they do deserve a lot of darts because they're but to a certain extent, who created them, right? I mean, um, who, they weren't born with that cell phone in their hand. Okay, a parent gave it to them. Or maybe the parent didn't give them that cell phone at age 3, but probably stuck some little, digital toy to distract them. Okay, and as soon as they were old enough, they got a little toy cell phone and they got a bigger one. And I mean, parents are responsible for their children. Um, and and you've seen this. I think we've talked about this, Carlos and Marcus, in previous segments. About how this being with this electronic umbilical cord, with our cell phone, scientists are actually showing that it causes changes in our brains, and brain activity and stuff, right? And what you were alluding to, Marcus, you can't even remember phone numbers, right? And more importantly, colleges have adapted and school systems are adapting to the fact that these young men and women have very limited attention spans. Okay, they've changed critical tests like reading comprehension. They've made them like really stupidly simple. Okay, they can't read and comprehend, right? And one of the I follow a couple guys that are really involved in one guy's the head of the University of Dallas, which is a private school. It's actually a Catholic school in Dallas, and their curriculum is heavily influenced. At least the first couple of years, it's mandatory to read the great works of literature, Homer and read Aristotle and Shakespeare. I mean all the classic literature, if you will, dating back to the Greco-Roman era and up to the modern age with phenomenal writers and philosophers and things of this sort. And one of the points that's made is there is no substitute for reading, because reading you have to focus on the book, and what you learn when you read is critical thinking, right? You're sort of putting passages together, and you're trying to follow a storyline. And that doesn't happen when you have a cell phone and all of the answers you need are right there at your fingertips, and you don't have an attention span that lasts more than a few minutes. So, but again, kind of saying that that it's not entirely the fault of this young generation. Parents have a lot to do with it, and they do have they're graduating with a ton of debt. They've got some other issues there that we didn't have. So. Anyway.
Well, we said two generations of substandard, of subpar, underachieving people, not just one generation. The current generation, as you correctly pointed out, was enabled, created in great part by the other generation, who allowed basically communism to substitute education, communist indoctrination, because it's what it is, and it's the playbook. And then we get these kids, and they listen right now. And let me tell you real quick, Marcus. Right now, there's Meta's being sued for trillions in California, and it breaks one's heart to see these mothers whose daughters committed suicide. They're testifying, and then part of me says, "Where were you, mom, when your daughter was having problems? Were you checking on her computer use?" I know it's easy to say that, and not having children, maybe I'm not qualified to make such judgments, but where's the parenting, which is what Raul was saying. Who created what? Go ahead, Marcus.
And I think we need to kind of refocus the conversation. We're going from a micro level. Now we got to step back to the macro level about the Democratic Civil War, and
Yes.
we got to understand that we're looking at a war between the establishment and the progressives, and and you get figureheads carrying the banner for each group. You get like the Newsom group, you get the Harris group, you get the Clintons, you get the Obamas, you get the Harris group, and you got like the Bernie Bros with the AOC. So there's a tug of war, and what we're seeing is the Democrats, the establishment, are realizing that they initially took the DSA types, the progressives, because they're highly motivated. They're a good pawn piece to utilize. They could be on the front lines at rallies. They could embarrass Republicans because they're very activist. They could be martyrs, but what they're realizing is they created their own Frankenstein monster. They realize that now they've matured. They go, why are we the pawns when we could be the king and queen makers? And then you see the blowback coming back at the establishment. Now the establishment is responding to that blowback. They said, "Oh, you know what? We lost 6 establishment Democrats in the primary," and they're like, "What the fuck?" And it's like, and they don't even feel safe. Now this becomes like a survival situation. It's like, all right, we're gonna have to take stands. We're gonna have to have our mouthpieces do the canary to address to the public, while the party pieces apparatchiks do their maneuvering. So you get Carville making an announcement, then you get other people who or the voice piece for the establishment say, hey, we got to stop the shenanigans. Then you see some weird things that happened in Wisconsin with Hong, who had a 20-point lead. Then whatever a little trip with all the updated voting, it flipped. And the guy was like, I can't explain this.
Yeah.
I would think the U.S. But by the way, there's a theory about that the establishment is laying a trap for them, that they're making all these bullshit polls. So it's like, don't worry, comrade, baby, you're winning by double digits. This thing is a shame, and then it really isn't that way. But they show them these juiced polls, and then created, engineered, and then when they lose, they can trot them out. So in other words, they just want to make sure that in the end, if you're a Democrat, you would rather probably not have the most extreme person in your party run against a Republican. I think I think Mike Rogers is already ahead 4 points. When they debate, I think Mike Rogers is going to whoop his ass. He's trying to run down and say, no, I didn't mean that about Hassan Piker. And even today, Hassan Piker, no, please, I misspoke. No, the fuck you misspoke. You got busted, and you guys go back 20 years and make some remark about anything, a weapon for today, but they don't like when it happens to them.
Yeah.
Raul, what do you think will happen to what's the theme? You know, as far as the ongoing battle between the establishment and the young Frankenstein monster. What do we look forward to?
Um, I think you're starting to see within the Democratic Party there is pushback. I think people are realizing that this whole idea about having communists under your tent was not such a bright idea. Or real radicals and people that want to just upend party. But they're trying to fix it. But the problem is that none of those quote unquote rational Democrats um, really have any traction these days, right? I mean, the front runner for the Democratic nomination right now appears to be AOC,
Yeah,
right? Um, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, Kamala Harris. What are you gonna bring back Kamala Harris? Is that going to be your candidate? Is that your and believe it or not, they have a couple of people that they could put out there that are still halfway normal. Trying to think of Andy Bashir, the governor of Kentucky, right?
I'm stuff in Georgia, and I'm
Huh?
stuff in Georgia.
Yeah, there's a handful of those guys, but you don't hear much from them, right? Because all of the wind right now is in the sails of the AOCs and Rashida Tlaib's and all these people and the radicals um, are in control. Luckily, lately, who's this guy? Well, John Fetterman, is suddenly like, he's become a darling of the sane people in the Democratic Party. When a couple of years ago, he was lurch and people were making fun of him because show up in gym shorts for House votes and stuff like this, and or Senate votes, I should say. But I don't know. I don't know what the Democrats can bring to the table. I mean, who are they going to put up? Meantime, Republicans have a very, very deep bench, right? I mean, obviously, you've got Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, you've got guys like Ted Cruz. There's a bunch of people that we could put out there to run for president, right? So.
But you're talking also, Raul, about presidential, and yeah, hell, it matters. That's 2028. But right now, the
Yeah.
wind is in the sails for the midterm.
Right.
Maybe they're hoping, well, if we can take at least one or both chambers, then we can neuter Trump enough. But yeah, I mean, I picture AOC. That's a real dream. AOC
Yeah.
debating J.D.
But,
Vance or Rubio.
look. The Republicans have a two person margin, right, in the House of Representatives, right? I mean, it's they're holding on by a very thin thread, right?
That's
So
my concern, not
they
828.
yeah, yeah, they can't afford to lose any, So
And then they have a Senate that's blocking everything they accomplish. Uh, so we have our own kind of war. I think we have the worst, most damaging war is within the Democrat Party, no
mhm,
question.
mhm.
I think that the next few weeks are going to say, personally, I think the next few weeks are going to have a say in how much they fight back. If, for example, if the next couple of state primaries occur, every week is a new primary, 2, 3 states, 1, 2 states. What happens is when those primaries occur, if the communist candidate wins, they're going to say, "Hey, you old people, shut up." Okay,
Mhm.
we won. You better like the squad did to Pelosi. AOC and Talib sat her down and Ilhan Omar and said, "Hey, Grandma, zip it because you're getting back this fucking gavel because we won. So shut up. Let us have some free reign." But if on the other hand, if they start getting smoked, then I think you're going to see more vigorous attack. I think the establishment will be a little more emboldened because they'll say, "See, we told you so," rather than being lectured. See, old timers, we told you so. Yes, Marcus.
I'm going to go with the quote first and kind of explain. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And what I'm going to predict is that the establishment Democrats, they're going to align themselves with the Republicans. Just say, like, because right now, it's hard to unseat a safe seat if a person wins the primary. Okay, but as Raul mentioned, like it's a two-seat margin, but it's really like maybe a 15 seat. There's a swing, and then you get like the redistricting and whatnot. But it's still very thin. We're not going to see those 70 seat swings anymore. It's all within a dozen or so. And the thing is, I see there's going to be an alliance with or a level of help with established Democrats. If they know they're going to lose a primary seat, they're going to help the Republicans win in the general in a Democrat safe seat, just for the Republicans to get a temporary win, to to lose a radical, to get him purged out of the system, to eventually retake the seat like one cycle down 2 years later. I think they're willing to take a temporary loss to get the future gain, so they don't have more radicals. That's my prediction. Because, and you know what, history has that, where the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Crusades, you get Muslims. There's a difference between the Shiite and the Sunni. You get one sect who's going to be overtaken by, like, just say by the Shiites. They align with the Crusader people in the Crusader kingdoms to form a loose alliance, or as a buffer, so they don't get overtaken. And the thing is, it's like, or at least I could trust this Muslim because my back is secured. So I see something like this happening, and for them, it's they're on life support. So they could always say, well, I mean, they have to refinance the party, while the Republicans are at $100 million war chest or $200 million. So they could pick and choose the battle, and they could time when they go full on. Well, like Democrats, they have to be very selective, and I think when it comes down to being selective, they're going to have to realize, like I said, a moment's sobriety. They're going to have to take some losses, but they have to be strategic losses. Do they want 10 more ARCs, or they take a Republican that they're going to eventually gain the seat back 2 years later? So that's my prediction.
I think that when they duke it out, even now, not so much now because we're in primaries, but in 2028, if you guys thought that it was they didn't have, see, in 2024 they didn't really have a primary. It was an anointment. It was a coronation, and the thing happened with Hillary too, with her super delegates switcheroony. The Democrats are pissed about that, very pissed about that, and I think they vowed that that's not going to happen. So it's going to be a slugfest. You're going to see Bashir that Raul mentioned, and you're going to see Ossoff battling it out, and there will be some others more extreme. There'll be Gavin Newsom, and I think they'll turn on him. Like you said, they'll say, "Hey, you failed as mayor of San Fran, even more as governor of the state. Shut the fuck up, go away." And Harris, they'll say, "You blew $2 billion and didn't do a goddamn thing. Go away, get lost." That's what I think. Though, if they're smart, if they have any kind of another thing, and I'm going to touch on this topic, and Raul, I'd like to hear your take on this. The Republicans will have principle that sometimes, live by principles, die by principles. They'll get pissed off at some candidate. Well, I'm going to stay home because I didn't like that rhino, and we're going to teach the Republican Party a lesson. Hello, Democrat winner in that race. The Democrats have shown over the years that they have no principles. They're fully willing to hold their nose, and go blue no matter who. Bumper stickers that I've seen, or I've seen it online as well, memes. Will they just in the end say, well, I'd rather have that communist than that evil Trump loving Republican? Do you think that's going to have any effect?
I don't think that's going to happen. And part of the evidence that I point to is, if you look at, for example, Republicans are having a pretty good day in terms of voter turnout, in terms of getting new voters registered and stuff. Okay, and they're making an enormous effort at the national level to make sure that what you described doesn't happen. Right, that they're out there, pounding the pavement, registering, people as, new Republicans, which was always kind of like the strength of the Democrats, right? But we're bringing a lot of new people into the party. The other thing, getting back to one of the issues that may also hurt, Democrats is, they're fighting tooth and nail for people not to have to show IDs. Okay. And Trump is putting a lot of pressure to, clean up electoral rolls and stuff. Right. So,
Yeah.
If you in fact have, quote unquote, fair elections where everybody has to show up an ID and has to show up on election day, that completely turns the tide, if you will. Okay, because Democrats, and particularly in places like California, it's all about, voting by mail. It's all about, not having any ID requirements. Why? So that they can cook the books. That's happening. That's happening in Democratic states all over the country, right? I mean, that's why they pay for all that stuff. And now you're seeing a lot of pushback from the Trump administration. Meantime, the Republican Party, is going out there, registering new people, and I mean, here in Florida, Florida's gone from being purple to being red again, right? Because of those efforts in Florida.
Well, it's also Turning Point USA. They may have killed Charlie Kirk, but they sure as hell didn't kill Turning Point USA. I see a lot of ads for them about ballot chasers, where they're signing up people, and that's part of the very original concept of Turning Point was precisely that: get voters out there. That guy with the long hair, Scott Pressler, is doing a good job. Meanwhile, I'm seeing staffers for different Democrat candidates, especially DSA candidates, are making comments like, I see, in, for example, Michigan, Mike Rogers, right? Senator Mike Rogers. Well, hopefully Senator Mike Rogers. He barely lost to Alyssa Slotkin. He's driving around in this beautiful vintage Ford pickup. Let's not forget, Ford was born in Dearborn, Michigan. Okay, and this jackass said, "I see that, and it's like KKK rallies and cross burnings. Are you fucking stupid?" And what is that? That's a stupid fucking kid that never got educated, has no idea what the KKK is, has no idea that the KKK was created by Democrats, as was slavery, as was secession, as was the Civil War, as was Jim Crow. And that's where they're going. But again, the average idiot voter doesn't know that either. And that's where you got to do. I don't care if it's 10-second sound bites on TikTok, 30 seconds, whatever. That has to be put out there. But he's equating, just like that other moron, that Korean chef. I'm a chef, but I hate Thanksgiving. And then 2 days later, oh no, it's my favorite holiday. Give me a fucking break. She reminds me of that Miss Swan on Saturday Night Live. That's nice. Unbelievable. She got waxed. She's done. But what did she do immediately though? She immediately joined up and is gonna go with I think it's McCormick, or the guy who won in that state, the guy who beat her barely, but he beat her. It's interesting that Tony Evers, to me it looks like Evers, but they call him Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, did not campaign with Miss Swan. He campaigned with the other guy who had been unheard of until 4 weeks ago. That's how desperate, like you said, that's how the desperation level of how it is. The governor of the state, who has a lot of cred online, was willing to campaign with a neophyte, but it worked. He knocked off the extremist DSA. Yes, Marcus.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, what we're going to see is with the Civil War, you're going to see like a Democratic establishment purge. So going back to that Wisconsin with Hong, where McCormick won, he seceded or suspended his campaign, and then he revitalized. And my take is, did it happen in the vacuum, or did the establishment reach out to him, go, hey, get back in the race, we'll hook you up, and then you'll get this 2 a.m. USB a data dump, and you'll be the nominee. I think we're going to see more of that as it goes along to purge the DSA, and it's not like it's not unheard of, because like Bernie Sanders, 2016, he was cheated out, and 2020 he was blocked. So that, what that did, like its own Frankenstein monster, is like, you know what, the DSA is like, we're just going to take over the Democratic Party. So
Yeah.
that was like a fuel for the fodder for them to do what they're doing right now, and then this is just a classic blowback for the Democratic establishment.
Well, honestly, but what, let's go back a second to 2016. Bernie got screwed with the super delegates, right? What happened then? The Bernie bros got pissed and stayed home. Whenever you hear a Democrat commentator, pundit, whatever, with the honesty to speak truth, with the courage, they'll say, damn it, what the hell were we thinking, giving Hillary that nomination? We cheated Sanders. He had the juice, whatever, the momentum. I still don't think he would have beat Trump, but Trump would have destroyed him in their debates. He would have had a far more radical viewpoint to defend. But anyway, without getting too much into the old history, the fact that he got mistreated, cheated, whatever, yeah, it sounds like a song. I've been cheated, been
In two
mistreated.
presidential cycles.
Yeah, but but what was the upshot? The young voter got pissed off and they stayed home. And I think if you, what you're saying, and I don't disagree, I think they are cooking the books, pulling any maneuver to purge, to block as many DSAs. I think a lot of the followers will be pissed off and say this was all for nothing, and hopefully stay home rather than hold their nose and turn out no matter what. Uh, your take on any of this, Raul?
Um, what there's a lot there. What specifically are you going to comment on? I mean,
Whatever occurs to you, whatever one you like.
look, man, again, I don't have a crystal ball. Do we have any results of what's happening in these primaries and stuff? I mean, I think, are there any real surprises out there that I'm looking at? Huh?
No, it's earlier in Wyoming, it's earlier, and it's earlier in Alaska. But let me see if I can find something on Florida
Yeah.
primaries.
No, but I think that I haven't seen. I mean, just glancing briefly here. I don't see like any surprises. Okay. But I think the whole theme of this conversation has been, and I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the Democrats are in a bind. They're having problems with fundraising because their scams are being exposed. The lies they told during the Biden administration, I mean, are being exposed. The even the media has taken a hit on this because you now you've got what's his name, the CNN reporter Jake.
Tapper.
Yeah, even coming out and saying that, yeah, we knew that Biden was, that he wasn't really there, right? I mean, after they spent years propping him up, now they're finally admitting that, so these guys have an enormous, black eye, the Democrats, right? And the traditionalists are weak, the radicals are taking advantage of it, and it's going to cost them dearly in November. I think that's kind of like the what we're seeing here, and I think Democrats need to get their house in order, but they're having a tough time because they're getting attacked at all levels, losing fundraising, losing credibility, and they have to get back. They have to at least acknowledge that there's some things that we can all agree on. Okay. The Constitution is important. Separation of powers is important. The individual rights are important, right? The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. We don't need to pack the Supreme Court, right? But the infection is massive. I don't know how you fix it overnight.
Well, I'm an expert, I'll tell you, with IV antibiotics. But anyway, just newsflash here. Oh, and by the way, Jake Tapper, hypocrite son of a bitch that he is, wrote a CYA cover your ass book called Original Sin.
Yeah.
We sinned when we lied to you about Biden. But after he insulted and degraded Lara Trump on the show, remember?
Right.
You know anything about quick updates here, gentlemen? Democrat primary. This is a good one for me anyway. As it Nixon, this is now for Florida Senate. Nixon beat Vindman. I absolutely loathe Alex Vindman. That guy that looks like he's got a button stuck up his ass. That spineless. I don't give a shit if he's a decorated veteran. To me, he is slime. That's the guy that was one of the whistleblowers in the recent impeachment. And Ashley Moody, 80%. She smoked Gleason. Might as well have run against Jackie Gleason. Now let's look at governor. Donald's is let's see. Well, David Jolly's
You
going
know,
to win.
Byron Donald has it wrapped up. He's got, he's got a huge margin. He's got a huge
Yeah,
fundraising
It's
advantage.
unfortunate. I prefer I prefer the lieutenant governor.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I hear you.
Congress.
I hear you.
Yeah, he like Collins, as a matter. He supported Collins as a matter of fact. And his opponent's going to be David Jolly, so he should be able to whoop David Jolly's ass. I don't see where that's going to be a problem. Wasserman Schultz is surviving. Okay, she's beating Holness. I guess that was one of those. He is one of the radicals. So there you go. Wasserman Schultz is winning. As far as I remember, she was one of the three Florida districts being challenged by a Marxist, and
Well, I never thought the day that I'd hear that, you're sort of describing Debbie Wasserman Schultz as being like moderate, right? I mean, I always saw her as like a
She's a
huge
progressive.
bomb,
I mean, no,
flaming liberal, and now
she's
she's actually, she hasn't changed, okay, but the people within her party have gotten even more radical than her, right? So
Yeah, she
suddenly,
was woke one. Everyone else is woke two or woke three.
yeah, right.
yeah,
So it's kind of hilarious trying to think about that, right? You were like one of the most liberal, flaming liberal people in Congress, okay, and now. Not because you changed, okay, but because the people around you become more radical. Now you're suddenly like, well, wait a second. Thank God, I'm going to win this election because I happen to be the only, you know, uh, I have a tiny bit of sanity left in my brain, type of stuff, right? And
well,
so,
right. Let me clarify this. Angie Nixon, is one of the commies. So one of three commies is going to win, and she beat butt boy Alex Vindman. Okay? So what that means is she's going to be an easier opponent to defeat. That's who Ashley Moody's going to be running against.
Ashley Moody's going to, she's going to clean the floor, man. I mean, I met her recently.
Yeah, she's a
Very
dynamic.
tough gal, very genuine, very smart, very humble. Very no, she's solid. She really is. She comes across as you can connect with her. She's earnest, I guess is a good way to describe her when she talks. She listens to people with questions. She responds on point. She's empathetic. I mean, she's really I was impressed. I never really knew her. And I heard her talk a few weeks ago, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, I knew her from Dennis Day on the Hill when we go to Tallahassee for every session for lobbying. And a lot of these people, it's so nice to see them later, go into a federal office. I knew them as state legislators because obviously when healthcare law is state by state. So we need to maybe start bringing this home tonight. From where I'm sitting, this looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Moody's going to win against the communist. She should smoke her ass. Donalds is probably going to win. And the communists that wanted to knock off, Roach used to call her Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz.
Yeah.
Well, he's been muffled there. Looks like she's surviving. So
Yeah. Isn't it ironic that here we have, in Florida, the Republicans are the ones that, have Byron Donald, a black guy, likely being the next governor of Florida, which is kind of like what Democrats wanted a few years ago when they put up that nutcase that was eventually busted in a South Beach hotel, with drugs and a male prostitute and all that stuff. I forget his name. Huh?
He tested. He went in like a probation drug testing program. He said in areas the other day, listed for meth.
Yeah, but look, the Republican Party. I mean, look, we're hip and happening. We're progressives. We don't discriminate. We've got Byron Donald running for governor. You guys, the Democrats, you should vote for him, right?
Yeah. I just saw that Angie Nixon communist who beat him, who Ashley Moody should mop the floor with. She was outraised 16-1. Vindman outraised her 16-1, and he still lost. That's how unelectable and retrograde that guy is.
Yeah.
So
he'll be radioactive for a long time after that.
Yeah, I suppose he will, and so will she once she gets whooped in November. So after everything is said and done, it looks like this war. I'm going to leave. This will be my parting thought for tonight. I think that this war in the party is going to hurt them a lot more than than the idea that they could be taken over by people we can't beat. I think they're not going to be taken over, and the places where they do win gives us a better chance. So I'm going to echo what Raul was just saying. I think we actually have, despite everything, and despite the Republican Party's penchant for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, I think it's within our.
That's what I worry about, Carlos. We have that knack, and you know what? It's still a few months away. A lot can happen in a few months. You know,
Yeah.
this war is unsettled. Gas prices are slowly inching down, but you know they're not quite there yet. Trump is always, you know, he's a bit of a volatile guy, you know, as you've seen, right? And a lot can happen between now and November. So we got to keep pushing, and we got to keep, you know, hoping that the country stays on course.
Just wrap it up for us.
I think for self-preservation, the established Democrats, they're going to self-sabotage the DSA, the worst of the worst of them, because it's a lot easier. It's a lot harder to deal with an incumbent. So you got like Ilmar Omar, who won her primary with 80%, with all the negatives against her, just a primary. So it's like, excuse me?
It's a Muslim district.
Yeah, but you know what? They go on principle. They should vote on principle as well. You know, my take.
We didn't vote in principle, you know that as well as I do. But anyway,
but the thing is, it's like so we're going to see some self sabotage. You're going to see more alignment with establishment Republicans to unseat or make sure they guarantee it's a temporary win. That's my belief. I don't think it's unheard of for a party to purge extremists like the Republicans back in the 50s or 60s. They try to purge themselves with the John Birch Society. They were fiercely anti-communist. They were calling out the Canaries, but they were, and I think it was under Buckley. He's like, hey, we got to get rid of the. It's we're an open tent, and they're driving out other people. So I think we're going to revisit the past to the present with how the Democrats are going to handle the DSA.
okay, you just touched, I'm going to end off with this. You touched the musician in me. I am reminded of Uneasy Rider by Charlie Daniels when they accuse that guy of being a communist, whatever spy, and he says, no, you're not. That's not true. I don't have a Confederate flag. I don't even have a garage. You can call and ask my wife. And he says, I'm a faithful follower of Brother John Birch. He's a member of the Antioch Baptist Church. That's how he defended himself. Charlie Daniels, Uneasy Rider for you young people. Check it out. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, good show. We're going to be ending off. I bid you good night.
All right, terrific. Thanks.